Okay, I suppose all of you since last week have got your book started, right? Got the first 10 chapters already done on how to be happy, instructions from God. All of you looking at me like you don't know what you talk about. I spent the whole class period last week talking about writing a book, and nobody heard me. And then you wonder why I say nobody pays any attention to me. Okay, let's start out. What I was talking about last week, I made the illustration that if you want to do something, you want to get rich, you could just write a book and entitle it 50 Steps that will encourage, I said get rich, didn't I? Yeah, well, you sell your book, you get rich. 50 steps in the way to be happy. In other words, if you want to really be happy in this life, that's what the book of Proverbs is about. Now, again, we point out, I don't know how many different things he talks about. I'm guessing somewhere around 50 major things. You could probably break it down into some other things. But if you will do these things, it will keep you out of a great deal of trouble, and it will bring a great deal of happiness to your life. So if you started wondering or talking about what is the theme of the book of Proverbs, and you start looking, it changes from one verse to another, to another, to another, to another, to another. It talks about 100 different things, and you say, what is the theme? Well, that's what I'm trying to bring out in this class, is that the theme is, here are the things that you need to do in order to be happy in this life. That really is what it is about. It tells us many things that we need to stay away from, many things we need to do, and then it just tells us some things that's going to happen, whether you like it or not. And if we know these things, it will help us to get through life. Now, we start out today in chapter 18, and I'm going to go down and pick out verses today and look at them rather than just go kind of verse by verse, and we're going to finish the chapter here today. But as he starts out, he says, down in verse 8, the words of a whisperer are as dainty morsels, and they go down into the innermost parts. Now, you stop and you think about it, that here is a whisperer or a gossip, somebody that's telling secrets, and he says, now, the words of a whisperer are as dainty morsels. So think about last time you were at a party, and you walked in and you saw a lot of appetizers laying around, and you were hungry, and you looked at these, and boy, that looks good, and wow, that looks good, and you get to the chocolate-covered strawberry, and boy, that looks good, and here are all these dainty morsels that you have out here to eat. And so you go up and you start eating them. They're good, they're sweet. You really enjoy them. You can't stay away from them. You might walk away from the table, but then you get to thinking about something else. So you turn around and you go back. So now stop and think about how you react to dainty morsels, to morsels that are really good, appetizers that are just absolutely delicious, how they draw you back again and again and again, and how you enjoy them. That's what gossip is. The words of a whisperer are as dainty morsels, that we like to hear them. We want to know. They go down as a dainty morsel. They are sweet to our ears. Now, this is a weakness of man, but what he's saying is, this is what it is. This is what really it is all about. And they go down into the innermost parts. So we hear this about somebody, and it goes down into the innermost parts of our mind, of our soul. It's there now. So I listen to this, what somebody told me about you. And now then, every time I hear your name, I think about this. It comes to my mind. So I go tell it to Steve. Now every time Steve hears your name, it comes to his mind. And on it goes. And in a little while, whenever your name is used, that people are thinking about this dainty morsel that this whisperer passed along. It can be just as false as it can be. But now then, it has hurt your reputation. So now you look at this and you see, boy, this is a powerful thing. This is a terrible thing. And we say, yeah, it is. Now, how will that help us? What will that do to us? How will that help us? Well, it'll help us in this way. Suppose that Rod tells Steve something about me that's not true. Boy, Steve listens to it. Oh, boy, well, he listens. So he goes and he tells his wife. And his wife tells 42 other people. And you go on down, and other people now are knowing about it. Now, all of a sudden, it comes back to my ears. And I hear about this, and I hear this. And, well, Rod said this is true. Now, as I go to Rod, I say, now, Rod, I want to talk to you. And I understand that you told Steve, and this is not true, not a word of truth in it. Now, stop right there. How would Rod feel right now? See? How's he going to feel? He's probably going to say, I'm sorry, Lowell. Well, that's not quite enough. I understand it's going through the congregation now. I understand that there are 50 people that have heard this story that you started. Now, what are we going to do about it, Rod? Now, think about how he's feeling. That's what I want us to see. Remember, it all started out as a dainty morsel. But now then it comes down, and how would he feel now? It'd feel like he's drinking vinegar, wouldn't it? Just the most horrible thing in the world now that he has to face. So, if we want to be happy, how will this do it? This will just teach us, don't be a whisperer. Just don't be a whisperer, and think about all the problems that will keep you out of. You know, the problem with wisdom is this, that when you take wise advice and you do what wisdom says, and that's what this is, they're bits of wisdom, you will never in all of your life understand how many problems that kept you out of. That's the problem. If you could measure it and say, oh boy, I did this and that kept me from doing this and that kept me from doing this. Now there are some things you can do that with. You can do it with them, but something like this, and you say, I'm not going to become a party of a gossip chain. I'm not going to become a party of that. All right? You will never, ever know how many problems that kept you out of. I tell people when I have premarital counseling, and so they come in, and so we talk about, all right, now here's how a husband should treat a wife. Now, point number one, just one little thing. Now, I make a point as we go through. Now, as you leave here and you go your way, 50 years from now, you may look back and you may think, or you may leave right now and you may think, that didn't do me any good whatsoever. None whatsoever. But if you didn't know these things, think about all the trouble you would get into. And if you just take the advice of one or two of these things, think about how many hundreds of problems it'll keep you out of in your marriage. And so that's the way we need to look at wisdom. We need to look at wisdom and say, all right, if I really want to be wise, if I really want to be happy and stay out of problems, I need to put these wise sayings into my mind. All right, then he goes ahead and he said in verse 9, he also that is slack in his work is a brother to him that is a destroyer. Well, we all know what we think about somebody who destroys things. Somebody goes out and if you saw a farmer, somebody comes in, he buys a farm, and he goes out and he destroys the crops. We'd think, how foolish he is. What a wicked man a destroyer is. But now then he points this out. He said, now, he that is slack in his work. Now, how many times have we talked about workers in this class? Being energetic. The word the Proverbs use, they talk about slothful. They talk about just a little sleep now, a little sleep then. Just a few more minutes in bed now. Being slothful and how it will bring poverty upon you. And now then he parallels it and he says, he that is slothful in his work or slack in his work that doesn't work diligently is a brother to a guy that goes out and destroys. Because both of them are going to end up in poverty. Verse 10. The name of Jehovah is a strong tower. The righteous runneth unto it and is safe. Now, this will kind of help us understand the next verse, the reason I'm reading it. But the name of Jehovah is a strong tower. Now, in those days, a tower, what was a tower in those days? Now, as we think about it today, we think about maybe the Columbia Tower. So we think about a big building downtown and 60 stories high and so forth, and so it earns the name of tower. Well, what a tower was in those days is that when a farmer had a crop, a olive or grape crop, he would always build a tower. And out here in this tower, now the tower, you say, how tall would it be? Oh, it might be as tall as those fluorescent lights that go around there. It wouldn't be a tall thing. I've seen some towers that were even shorter than that. But what is a tower? A tower is a place of protection, a place that you put somebody that watches. It's a little stone house that's built out in a field that if somebody raids it, you can run in it for protection, or you can stay in it yourself and watch out and make sure that the foxes don't come and eat your crops or that some human doesn't come in and steal them. It's a place of safety. That's what I'm saying. Now, if you don't have that tower, you're probably not going to have any crops at the end of the year. So it's a place of safety, of security. Now, the name of Jehovah is a place of security. We can come to Jehovah, we can come to God and feel secure in the protection he gives us. And a righteous man will run to it and is safe. So if we're real righteous, we will put our faith, our confidence in God. But now then, let's look at the next one. The rich man's wealth is his strong city and has a high wall in his own imagination. So now here we have a couple other things. We have a strong city. What is a strong city? A strong city is a city that is established, and they will be established on a hill. Now, it may be a knoll, but it's up on a hill. So if the enemies come, they have to be coming up to attack. And it has a wall around it. And it will have a strong wall around it. Strong wall. I've always been impressed when I was over there that seeing the wall around Dan. And I stood and looked at it for a long time, just thinking about such things as this. Now, that wall around Dan is every bit as tall as this church building. That's how tall it is. If you're standing there on the ground and looking, well, it would be that tall at the shortest part. And made out of great, gigantic stones. And so you look at it and you say, now, if I were to come in here to try to take this city, how would I knock that wall down? See? Well, I don't know. How would you knock it down? See? Now, it goes straight up. So if you say, well, I'll climb up like that Spider-Man does that we see on TV once in a while. There are guys that are up on top that have their bow and arrows and their rocks, and so they just pick you off. So what you have is you have a strong city. You have a city that can't be taken. You have a city that is secure. You have a city that you know that you get in that city and you're safe. Nobody can take it because it's a strong city. and it has these high walls that are built around it. So a wealthy man, he can have these things. He can have this. And now then, the last few words are the key to this verse. It says here, it says, and as a high wall in his imagination. A high wall in his imagination. That is, you can just see him as he stands there, and he looks at this great city and this great walls, as I did, and thinking, there's no way on earth anybody could get in there. Had I been the king of Dan, wealthy man, ruling in there, I would have looked, and boy, look at the safety that I have. But he says it's all in your imagination. How many cities have existed that hasn't been conquered? Dan's been conquered. See? All of those cities been conquered. Jerusalem always had these great, gigantic walls, as tall as this building, built around it. And it's been conquered 27 times. As you dig down, you find 27 different layers of streets and houses, streets and houses, streets and houses. It's been conquered 27 different times. Now, if you build a strong city and you say, this is the safest place on earth, it cannot be conquered, what he's saying is that's all in your imagination. Now, we could say the same thing about America today. How many of us, how many people, how many times have you heard, America is so strong that nobody can conquer us? Think about that. Nobody can conquer us. Well, what other nation has been so strong that nobody could conquer? How do you go about conquering? There are cities that are so strong that people can't get over the wall, but other things have happened. Economy that just caused them to disintegrate. You've probably seen the stones of Petra built in a mountain of stones, a mountain of rock, and how powerful it is. Nobody could get in there. No one could get in there. It was a thriving, beautiful city. No one could get in there. Until one day, all of a sudden, for some reason, the road that came up from the south and went up into the north, the camel drivers decided that they would bypass Petra and they would go this way because it would make them more money. And what happened to Petra? Petra dried up, and today the only thing that lives in there is just a bunch of animals. And so what he's trying to say is, Jehovah is your real safety. Jehovah is the one you can trust. But strong cities, powerful walls, the strongest thing that human beings can make, they're safe only in your imagination. Just as a key to this, I saw about, 6 months ago, a guy sent me an email about the stone wall at Dan. And he said, you wonder, is this the way they got into Dan? And it showed this guy that is kind of like this Spider-Man, that climbs the towers all around. And here's this guy, and he runs up to that wall, jumps against it, bang, boom, ping, poog, over the top. Just like that. Just bow, pow, 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 poo, over the top. And you had to play that thing several times. You say, I can't believe, how did he hit all of that and get up there? Well, I don't know, but he did. Now there's a wall that can't be conquered. So you think about it. I don't know. Maybe they had a battalion of men, some people did. Some armies had 100 guys that had that ability. And so they walk up there and just bing, 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 and they're over the wall, and that's it. Okay, the lesson learned, trust in God, and there's nothing on this earth that you can put your trust in to say it will not fail you. It's all in your imagination. Well, in verse 12, before destruction the heart of a man is haughty, and before honor goeth humility. We've talked about this, so we're not going to be labored anymore. That when a man falls, a mighty man, when they fall, it's the thing that goes before them is they're proud and they're haughty. And when a king becomes proud and haughty, get ready, he's going to tumble. And the same thing is true with us. When what we've done, what we've got, the wealth we've amassed, whatever it is that makes me think that I am really something that is special, and so I become a proud, haughty individual, get ready, that is going to happen. Then 13. Here's something that'll help us. He that giveth answer before he heareth, it is folly and shame unto him. Now, what does this mean? Somebody comes to you and says, I got a problem, and I want to tell you about the problem. And so they start telling you about the problem, and before they get through, you say, here's the answer to your problem. You don't listen to the whole thing. You see, you think you understand what that problem really is, and so you give an answer before you hear the whole thing. Now, you might say, I've heard this story 100 times. I've heard it 500 times. And here's how it turns out. Well, if you're going to give an answer, listen to it one more time. Get all of your facts before you give an answer. Now, we're going to see in just a minute why this is true. So we'll hold this off, and we'll hit another verse down here that's going to tell us why it really is true. Then we come down to, we've in 14 and 15, we've talked about this. The spirit of a man will sustain his infirmity, but a broken spirit who can who can bear? So if you have a happy, contented, positive attitude, if your faith is built upon God, which is immovable, but if you have that cheerful attitude, you can endure infirmities. But if you don't have that happy, cheerful attitude, you're not going to be able to endure even the small little things that come in life. The small things are going to become unbearable for you, and you're not going to be able to bear it up. The power of human beings on this earth to be happy and contented is up here in the mind. How do you look at life? How do you look at yourself and God? When you die, is it better or is it worse? How do you feel about life in general? And if you can be happy, now you're hurting, terribly hurting, but you can bear with it if you have that attitude. That's why you see some people and you see them and you wonder how in the world can they be so happy and so cheerful, and somebody else, nothing like what they've got, and yet they're unhappy and sour and grouchy. You say, what's the difference? Well, the difference is up here. The difference is the attitude that they have toward the life that they're living. And when you say toward the life they're living, that's a big thing. See, that is big. Okay, the 15, the heart of the prudent getteth knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeketh knowledge. Now, if you're a wise person, what you're going to seek after is knowledge. You're going to try to get that knowledge because knowledge is what's going to get you through life. In verse 16, a man's gift maketh room for him and bringeth him before great men. In other words, what he's saying is that if you're nice to people and you give them a gift, it's going to go a long way into their heart and cause you to be at peace. And he uses here if you're going up before great men, going up before a great man, a king or something, bring him a gift and it'll do a lot of good. And so it's something that we all know, but you look at it and you say, well, that means then we need to be nice to people. Yeah, that's going to be the key. Now, verse 17 is that verse I said that will help us understand just a bit what we talked about a minute ago. He that pleadeth his cause first seemeth just, but his neighbor cometh and searcheth him out. Now, when you come and you bring a problem to me, and so you come and you start in and you start telling how rotten your husband is, or how rotten your wife is, how somebody mistreated you, what they did. And so you tell the story. 100% of the time, 100% of the time, it will sound like you're totally in the right. You're going to tell that, and my impression, 100% of the time, will be, you're right, and that husband of yours is a real louse. That is the way it's going to be, because you're telling your side of the story. Now, back up to this verse up here that I mentioned a moment ago, here in verse 13. He that giveth answer before he heareth, it is folly and shame unto him. So now, if I start in, I say, well, I tell you what, you're obviously married to a louse, and he is this and he is that, and what you need to do is you blah, blah, and so I give you some advice. Now, I've given you advice before I've heard the whole story. I haven't heard his side of the story. But you say his side of the story is so bad. It's so bad. I mean, you listen to her, and it's so good, he couldn't have anything good to say. No, wait just a minute. Wait a minute. Because 100% of the time, when you listen to his side of the story, you're going to hear some things and say, oh, I didn't realize that. That changes the thing entirely. Just totally, completely changes the thing. Just totally and completely, entirely changes the thing. So don't be a fool. And when you hear one half of a story, make up your mind and say, okay, here it is. Always get the other half, and then you can start making some wise decisions. And you might even find that person that came to you first, that you thought is so innocent, turns out to be a horribly, horribly guilty individual. This has happened to me just in the last month. Some people came and just terrible, and they were going to court, and my, how bad he is. And then I get his side of the story, and oh, I didn't know that. Well, now, wait a minute. Oh, and so we turn this thing around that's in here. So don't ever try to make up that mind until you hear the whole story. All right, let's look at verse 19. A brother offended is harder to be won than a strong city, and such contentions are like the bars of a castle. Now this is terrible, but it's true. And that is, when you have a contention in your own family, in people in your own family, then for some reason or another, it's almost impossible to heal it. It says it's harder to win a brother that's been offended than it is a strong city. It'd be easier to go take that strong city I talked about, Dan, that city with all that walls around it. You got a better chance of breaking that down and taking that city than you have of breaking through the heart of this person that's been offended. And we see that happens, well, I'm not going to say frequently or all the time, but there's hardly been a time in my life that I didn't know about a situation of where this happens. And it's a horrible and terrible thing. So be careful and understand that even in your own family, that's where the real dangers lies, because that person is not going to be broken down. It says their contentions are like a bar on a castle. You walk up to a castle and hear all these iron gates, and you look at it, how do I get there? How do I break through these iron gates? Well, that's how it is to try to break through this person's heart. 21. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. Now, we've talked about this tongue a lot. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, of what you say. Your happiness, to a great extent, is going to depend on what you say in this life. See, there's a point you can make in your book, and you might put it in great big print. And you might say, one of the things to where most of your happiness will depend is on your tongue. That's where most of it will be, is there on the tongue. And so he says, now, the power that's in the tongue, that produces life or death, good or bad, your happiness or your unhappiness. And they that love us shall eat the fruit thereof. If you really watch your tongue, you really love that, you're going to eat the fruit thereof. You're going to have a happy life, if you really do that. Then, verse 22, whoso findeth a wife findeth a good thing, and obtaineth favor of Jehovah. Now, what can I say about that? All right, this is God's plan. God's plan for man in this life to be happy is to have a good wife. When God created man, what's the first thing he did? He looked at man that he created, and he says, it is not good. That's the first thing that God said wasn't good that he created. Everything else, when he created it, the sun, the moon, the lights, animals, and all that, he looked, he said, it is good. But when he created man, he says, it is not good. Now, he didn't say that man was not good, so let's keep that in mind. He didn't say, I made a mistake. I made a mistake and I didn't do a good job on man. No, he did. He said, it is not good that he should be alone. And then he said, I will create an answer to his problems. So God says, I've created man. Man is good. But it's not good that man be alone. So I'm going to make a woman. And it says then here, whoso findeth a wife findeth a good thing. Because you have found God's answer to your problems. Now you say, well, can it ever turn out to be a big problem? Yeah. And we'll run across that later on right here. But yeah, so it's God's plan to have a wife. Then in verse 24, he that maketh many friends doeth it to his own destruction, but there is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. This, again, can be tied into wealth and so forth, and probably have a chance to talk about it more a little bit later on. But he that maketh many friends doeth to his own destruction. That is, friends can cause you a great deal of unhappiness, is what he's saying. They can turn and they can cause you a great deal of unhappiness. But then he points out there is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. But don't think that all friends will do that, because some friends are so good, they're so close, they will stick to you just like a brother, or even closer than a brother. Well, that brings us down to the time that the bell is ringing today, so there's where we close.